Hi everyone, I'm Beatriz
I'm Mariana,
and we are from Portugal.
and we want to present you some difficulties in communication between Portuguese and Japanese cultures.
And some suggestions to overcome them.
To begin, let's clarify the notion of communication and culture. Communication is a simple act of transferring information. Although this is a simple definition, when you think about how we may communicate, the subject becomes more complex. There are various categories of communication, and more than one may occur at any time. It influences what you say to yourself and how you talk with friends, lovers, and family in every conversation. It influences how you interact in groups and how much importance you place on the group versus the individual. It influences the topics you talk about and the strategies you use in communicating information or persuading. It influences what you use the media and the credibility you attribute to them. It's impossible to communicate effectively without being aware of how culture influences human communication. There are many aspects that can condition interpersonal communication. Coming from many countries and as exchange students in University of Macau, we started to come into contact with different cultures in order to integrate into our new environment. Cultural differences, among others, are one of the problems we face in communication. Now let's talk about culture. Culture can be defined as a system of behavior that help us act in accepted or familiar way. There are many cultures and each one has specific habits, values and beliefs that influence people. It's also important to talk about ethnic identity. It refers to one's sense of belonging to an ethnic group and the part of one's thinking, perceptions, feelings, and behavior that is due to ethnic group membership. We Portuguese self-characterized as like with lack of punctuality, disorganization, individualistic, fun, sociable, open. For example, when a foreigner comes to us for an indication, we always try to find a common language and make an effort to make the other person clear. We are seen as people who welcome the guests very well. Another example, when we open a door, we are attentive and stand by the door if anyone comes after us. But they haven't only good things. About the time. We like to do everything in the nick of the time, and we rarely get to the place on time. Most of the time, I set a coffee at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and at 4, I'm still getting ready. And my friend calls me like, oh, sorry, but I'm late too. And we meet at 5 in the afternoon. Very regular in our culture. The Japanese culture self-characterizes it as do not put much values on leisure, but work. The work is the top concern in life. Sometimes they must skip their children events like the sports day because they are so busy to work in the office. It's also not a good option to express their feelings or emotions to others. For example, if they are tricking up their money during a trip, they usually think that is their fault and they need to pay more attention to not happen again. It is a good point of Japanese people, but also it can be a problem that Japanese people are discounted by others in abroad. Each culture has your assumptions in things like what is to be polite or rude, even in the simplest form of communication. For example, in nonverbal communication, when we see each other and greet, each culture has a different costume. For example, for us, Portuguese, the Japanese concept inimuri
For example, falling asleep in class is seen as a major lack of politeness. In Portugal, if this happened, we would be automatically reprimanded by the teacher. On the other hand, for Heisey, the inimuri is only to close the eyes, but without stop paying attention to what happens around them, only for the mind to rest.
When you live with different culture, instead of looking at others, we should also look at ourselves. When looking at a landscape, for example, for a garden of our campus, we describe it in very different ways. For us, Portuguese, it is something very pleasant, and we value immensely to have this space around us. But for Ezi, to have a garden or buildings is the same thing. It does not make a difference. This is the real challenge of relating to other cultures. We have different ideas of the accepted and familiar. Thus, we enter the process of acculturation. This occurs through the contact of two or more different matrices, that is, through the social interaction between groups or different cultures, all of which or one of them undergo change, resulting in a new culture. In this sense, this happens when our very distant cultures adapt to each other and try to share a little of two and act on both.
The Japanese have the custom of taking off their shoes as soon as they enter the house, the homes of others, or even in some public spaces. Shoes are only allowed at house entrance in an area called Gwenkan. Gwenkan is always a step below the main entrances of the house. It is the traditional entrance area for Japanese houses and buildings, consisting of a balcony or a room with a rug where you must remove your shoes. In Portugal, we rarely think about it. It's not acceptable and familiar. Maybe in the first clash of culture, Asia will think of us, why they not take off their shoes? That's rude, lack of hygiene. But we have to go further and realize why the Portuguese do not take off their shoes. Learn the underlying values to be able to communicate. We all do the same things, but in different ways. In this case, it is also important to highlight and try to understand certain customs.
Why take off them shoes? For two reasons. The first, it's obvious. It is for the sake of cleaning the house. A house with a clean floor is always pleasant. The basic idea is to protect the interior of the house from the contamination brought from outside. But it's not just physical hygiene. We can also talk about spiritual hygiene. When they talk about take off them shoes, they get rid of all the impure energies out there from the streets. Taking off them dirty shoes and leaving them in the grey can, they will not let these energies invade the harmony of them home. The Japanese are very attached to the energies. The Japanese have a very deep understanding of the difference between spaces. The Gwenkan is a kind of post-frontier between the outside world and the sanctuary of the house. Even when entering them own home, uki, which means inside, the act of taking off their shoes is a symbol of giving up the worries and problems as well as the dirt of the outside world, Soto. In Portugal, there isn't so much population density, nor beliefs in energies, so it does not make sense for us to remove our shoes. Although, in this, we have to be careful not get carried away by ethnocentrism. In other words, by the tendency to see others and their behaviors through your own cultural identity, often have distortions of your own behaviors. It's the tendency to evaluate the values, beliefs, and behaviors of your own culture as superior, as more positive, logical, and natural than those of other cultures.
Success in interpersonal communication at your job and in your social and personal life will depend in great part on your understanding of and your ability to communicate effectively with persons who are culturally different from yourself. Intercultural communication refers to communication between persons who have different cultural beliefs, values, or ways of behaving. We must be aware of cultural difference that exists when we communicate. Each of these dimensions of difference has significant impact on all forms of communication. The first dimension, individual and collective orientation. It can be defined as the degree to which people in a society are integrated into groups. Individualistic societies have loose ties and that often only relates an individual to his or her family. They emphasize the I versus the we. An individualist culture teaches members the importance of individual values such as power, achievement, hedonism, and stimulation. Its counterpart, collectivism, describes a society in which tightly integrated relationships tie extended families and others into intergroups. A collective culture teaches members the importance of group values such as benevolence, tradition, and conformity. Japanese culture, for example, at the school, they usually do the same things as others do. Japanese people hate to stand out. The things which others do is the right. Group harmony is more important than individual activities. In general, strumming has more sense of security rather than when they are alone. When they are grouping, they pause like they become stronger than usual. So many people, special families, tend to make groups whenever they go to coffee, go to the restroom, and so on. In Portugal, contrary to Japanese culture, we have a much more individualistic view. We like to try to the best at what we do without sharing that success with others. As for the study, we like to do it ourselves so we can concentrate better and try to do our best without sharing with others.
Second dimension, power distance, the extent to which the less powerful members of organizations and institutions, like the family, accept the power is distributed in equality. In Japan, even now, males are stronger than females, as the government member shows. Most of the managements in Japanese companies are consisted of males. Also, there are still salary gap between males and females, even if they do the same work for same times and same amounts. In family, males have strong power than females, but in terms of finance, females have power to manage that. We don't usually divide their salary in families. The third dimension, masculinity, femininity, culture. A preference in society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for success. Its counterpart represents a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak, and quality of life. In Japan, although the term of gender free, males and females are equal, are often used now. The masculinity still exists now conversely. Low rate of females. Advancement is a problem too. The works are almost divided what the males do and what the females do. For example, males are usually work at the office from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Females do all of housework in a whole day. But in Portugal, it's a little different. But men still have more power than women. There continue to be many families where women take care of children and men work to support the family. The fourth dimension: high ambiguity tolerant and low ambiguity tolerant cultures. Japan doesn't have any tolerance. They don't accept any immigrants, and it tends to be difficult for immigrants to take procedure in Japanese government. Japanese speak only Japanese and hardly accept other cultures. Although they accept public events, which belongs to other countries like Halloween and Christmas. Almost all of people in Japan don't understand the meaning of them, but they become annual big events in the year now. Portuguese are seen to have enough tolerance, love to receive people from outside. In fact, is a great country of tourism, and for the reason we like to get involved with the others.
Now, let's talk about the problems in our communication. One of the first problems that came up in the communication process was when we first met, when Beatriz and I went straight to AG to greet him when we are going to give him 2 kisses in face, just like we did with everybody, and he stretched out his hand. This moment created a certain tension for the continuation of the conversation because it left us all a little bit uncomfortable. We only knew our own visions and did not know that there were other ways of approaching people. Another episode that we came across was when we combined the first meeting to do the group work. AG was quite punctual while we arrived 10 minutes late. Indirectly, this will change the perception of AG in relation to us, because for Japanese culture, as we see before, punctuality is something taken very seriously. Probably he may have seen us like people with a lack of professionalism who do not know how to make a commitment. But for us, a delay of 10 minutes is something supernatural and common. Another of the situations was when me and Beatriz were telling a funny episode that happened to us in taxi in Macau. AG looked a little bit unexpressive in our thinking, showed lack of interest, and was even a little unpleasant because it seemed that neither heard us. After all, for Japanese culture, it is normal not to show facial expressions or any kind of feeling. They also very readily accept what they are told without asking any questions. For the Portuguese, this shows a lack of interest in what the person is saying. In Portugal, even if we do not have much to say, we always try to add or ask something to the person who shared this story, feels integrated and happy because people are interested in what is shared. All this difference that we talk about during a meeting and a conversation influence the emphasis of communication between a Portuguese and Japanese. But we can think about some principles for effective intercultural communication.
Principles for effective intercultural communication. First, educate yourself. There's no better preparation to intercultural communication than learning about the other culture. The University of Macau offers us the opportunity to live daily with different cultures and learn them through face-to-face communication instead by movies or documentaries that sometimes are a little bit tricky. Moreover, through the accomplishment of this work, we have obtained an even deeper learning about the Japanese culture that only the social coexistence would not have allowed us to research these points. Another part of this preparation is to recognize and face your own fears, which can stand in the way of effective intercultural communication. For example, when we talk with someone that doesn't have the same nationality of us, obligatory we need to talk in English, but sometimes English is not the mother language of any of the communicators. So we have to overcome the shame and difficulties we have when communicating in English. We may fear saying something that will be considered politically incorrect or culturally insensitive, and thereby losing faith. You may fear that members of this other group will react to you negatively because of these actions that you can make without realizing it. Either way, they need to be assessed logically and their consequences weighed carefully. When you will be able to make informed choice about your communications. The second point is to recognize differences. To communicate interculturally, we need to recognize the differences between ourselves and the people from other cultures, the difference within the other cultural group, and the numerous differences in meaning. A common barrier to intercultural communication occurs when you assume that similarities exist and the differences do not. You might easily accept different styles, clothing, and foods. In basic values and beliefs, however, you may assume that deep down all people are really alike. They aren't. When you assume similarities and ignore the differences, you will fail to notice important distinctions, and when communication will convey to others that your ways are the right ways and their ways aren't important to you. Differences in meaning. For example, to apologize in Japanese and Portuguese. Even though the same word is used, its meanings will vary greatly depending on the listener's cultural definitions. One proof of this is that while in Portugal we have two ways to apologize, in Japan there are at least 10 forms. 3 of them are sumimasen. It's often used as a mild apology. If you bump into someone on the subway, use sumimasen. Shitsurei can be translated I'm rude. It's an informal and mild apology. If you need to reach for something at the dinner table, say shitsurei. Gomen is a very informal apology that you should only use with close friends and family. Say gomen when you are 5 minutes late meeting a friend.
Adjust your communication is especially important in intercultural communication, largely because people from different cultures use different signals and or use the same signals to signify quite different things. As previously mentioned, focused eye contact means honesty and openness in much of the United States. But in Japan, in many Hispanic cultures, that same behavior may signify arrogance or disrespect if it occurs between a youngster and someone significantly older. Being in contact with the Japanese culture begins as a journey into another culture and reality and ends as a journey into one's own culture. Aspects of our culture that we only perceive when we know other perspectives. Living in an increasingly diverse world and with this opportunity of being an exchange student in the University of Macau, we can take the opportunity to learn more about our own cultural backgrounds and identities and about how we are similar to and different from people we interact with. However, it is important to recognize intercultural learning. It is not easy and comfortable.
To conclude, in 21st century, Is there any skill more important than being able to sustain current and confident conversation? All the time we are talking to people. We talk to people that we like, we talk to people that we don't like, we talk to some people that we disagree with deeply on a personal level, but we still have a great conversation with them. So we would like to talk about how to talk and how to listen. Everyone already listened things like look the person in the eyes. Think of interesting topics to discuss in advance. Look, nod, and smile to show that you are paying attention. Repeat back what you just heard or summarize it. So, I want you that you forget all of that. There is no reason to learn how to show you are paying attention if you are in fact paying attention. Learn to have a conversation without wasting your time, without getting bored, and without offending anybody. You've all had a really great conversation. We've had them before, we know what it's like. The kind of conversation where you walk away feeling engaged and inspired, or you feel like you've made a real connection or you've been perfectly understood. There is no reason why most of your interaction can't be like that. So, we will share some basic rules. Number 1. Use open-ended questions. In this case, we should take a cue from journalists. Start the question with who, what, when, where, why, or how. If we put in a complicated question, we are going to get a simple answer out. For example, if I ask, do you like to live in Japan? He will respond to the most powerful word in that sentence. It is like, and the answer is yes, I like, or no, I don't like. So let them describe it. They are the one that know. We should try to ask, how is to live in Japan? Because then they might have to stop for a moment and think about it, and we are going to get a much more interesting response.
Number 2. Go with the flow. That means thoughts will come into your mind and you need to let them go out of your mind. Sometimes we are sitting have a conversation with someone in which a first speaker is talking for several minutes and the second speaker comes back in and asks a question which seems like it comes out of nowhere or it's already been answered. That means the second speaker probably stopped listening 2 minutes ago because he or she thought of this really clever question and he or she was just bound and determined to say that. Stories and ideas are going to come to us. We need to let them come and let them go. Number 3. If you don't know, say that you don't know. We are from different countries. Clearly, that if I make reference to specific aspects of my culture, they will not notice. For example, it's very difficult to talk about national music with them.
The last one. Don't equate someone's experience with our experiences. For example, if AC talk about earthquake and tsunami in Tohoku region 2011, we can compare with earthquake and tsunami of 1755 in Lisbon. It's not the same. It is never the same. All experiences are individual and have a context. And more importantly, it is not about us. We don't need to take that moment to prove how amazing we are, how amazing our experiences are. Conversations aren't a promotional opportunity.